Hello, good morning, and welcome to FLW TV and our latest debate show. My name is Toby Wilding, and today we are going to be looking towards the wrong end of the League One table and the relegation battle that is currently ongoing in the third tier of English football. Joining me is Marcus Alley, my fellow Football League World reporter. Marcus, thanks for being here. How are you doing this morning?
Yeah, really well. Thanks, Toby. I think this one's shaping up quite nicely. A couple of months or so ago, it looked like the bottom four were possibly sort of rooted inside the relegation zone, but a couple of resurgences and some really poor runs from the sides above them has made this one a lot more interesting heading into the business end of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. There is plenty of teams for us to discuss over the next half hour or so on this debate show. So, with so much to get through, let's get started. So, just looking at the League One table here, as we say, there is plenty of sides who look to be in the mix who could still go down or stay up between now and the end of the season. And we're going to start at the very bottom of the League One table, Marcus. That's with Crewe Alexandra. Another defeat last night against Oxford. That's 7 in a row now. They're 10 points adrift at the bottom of the table, 10 points from safety. That is. So, do you give them any hope of getting out of trouble here?
I don't, sadly, know. There was a small sort of glimmers of hope under Dave Artell sort of around the turn of the year, just before the January transfer window. Not so much pushing them towards maybe surviving, but at least sort of getting something out of the season and building some positivity around Gresty Road ahead of what does feel like an inevitable relegation. I quite liked some of their January transfer business. Brought 3 players in on permanent deals: Dan Adji from Oxford United, Tariq Awakwe from Chelsea, and Bazala Sambu from I think it was Sittard in Holland. So some ambition shown there, some backing of the manager. They've got some exciting young players, as they always seem to have, but they haven't quite been able to make up for what was a really difficult summer transfer window. And yeah, even though there has been some shoots of recovery, I think it's always been more in the sense of, can we make it competitive? Can we, just start building some momentum and go down in a little bit better shape under Artell than maybe their recent form has suggested. So sadly, I think the gap is just too much at the moment, especially considering that the form of the likes of Donny and Gillingham just above them.
Yeah, as you say, there was some impressive business there at Crewe. I was quite surprised, as you say, the likes of Iwakwe, Raheem Harper as well in on loan from Ipswich. I was quite surprised that those sort of players were maybe having to go to that sort of position in the League One table to get that football. And as you say, that did sort of show a backing of Dave Artell, the manager. And interestingly, Crewe are actually the only side in the relegation zone at the minute in League One who haven't changed their manager yet at some point this season for one reason or another. And there does seem to be a bit of frustration growing amongst their fan base. So do you think a switch in the dugout is worth considering?
It's a tough one, really. I do have a lot of sympathy for Dave Artell. I think he's done an excellent job from where he took them from in League Two. I probably edge on the side that I'd like them to keep him for next season. Obviously, if this run goes on too long and the negativity just gets rooted even deeper in the club and in the playing squad going into the next season, then maybe a change would be advisable. But I just think he's a really promising young manager after what he's done with the club. Crewe were comfortably in and around mid-table last season. We see the credit that the likes of Mark Bonner's getting at Cambridge United this season. If the roles were reversed and next season the U's have a very tough season, I'd probably like to see Bonner stay at the club as well. So yeah, it's a tough one. I think Artell's got just enough credit in the bank to probably survive this relegation. Although if you're losing, stretches of games on the trot as they have done, 7 as it is now, if that goes on a bit longer, then they probably will have to make a change, because they're not showing any signs of positivity, and it does look like the players are not playing for the manager as they were a few months ago, which would be concerning, as the expectations will be adjusted going into next season.
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, if they do go down, then they may well be one who are expected to challenge for a quick promotion back. So that obviously, like you mentioned there, it puts a different sort of pressure on Artell or whoever is in charge. Now, Moving on one step up the ladder, and we find Gillingham, who have now taken 8 points in 6 since they did change their manager, bringing in Neil Harris. I mean, to me, that looked a really impressive appointment. Marcus, did you sort of feel the same way? And do you feel like you've seen enough from the Gills since he took over to sort of suggest they might get themselves out of trouble here?
I think they'll definitely be able to take it deep in the season and down to the wire. Neil Harris is an outstanding appointment for me. In terms of where I think he should be managing, I'd say at least championship level. In his last job at Cardiff, he was on the brink of the Premier League, really getting into the playoffs with the Bluebirds. And that job has aged so well because of the struggles of the likes of Mick McCarthy at the club since. Harris was sacked with Cardiff in mid-table last season, and they haven't really got back there since he was dismissed. I think in hindsight, the Cardiff hierarchy would probably say that he was doing about par, and even though he ended up getting sacked, it does seem like a locational appointment. Obviously, that was in South Wales, but he is from the area, obviously previously managing Millwall and playing for clubs in and around that part of the country as well. So I think that's possibly why he's managing at the bottom of League One. He's really shored them up defensively. They were unlucky to draw 0-0 against AFC Wimbledon last night, created 2.3 expected goals, but just weren't able to get it over the line. For Dane Oliver would certainly be frustrated not to have got himself on the score sheet. So there's definitely plenty to be feeling positive about at Priestfields in terms of giving it a right good go. Obviously, still 5 points off Wimbledon in 20th place. That they have got a way to go, and they have not been a free scoring side at any point really this season, which is probably going to make it difficult. There might be just a tiny bit too much work to do for Harris coming in this scenario, but I definitely think it's a great appointment in setting them up to potentially recover from what has been a disappointing season, but also give them a chance going into the last few weeks of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you sort of touched on there, the goalless draw with Wimbledon last night. We'll touch on Wimbledon shortly, but when you sort of look at the form that the Dons are in, does that really feel like a bit of a missed opportunity here for Gillingham to really put the pressure on the sides just above the relegation zone?
Yeah, at this stage of the season, it's hard to take too much encouragement from performances when you haven't got the results because time is running out, quite frankly. So yeah, it was definitely a missed opportunity. They created a lot of chances. They've made some decent signings in January. I think Ben Thompson is a very good addition in central midfield. And yeah, it's going to be tough, isn't it? That was a match that Harris would have earmarked as hopefully hoping to pick up 3 points. The two games they've won under Harris have both come to a 1-0 scoreline. If whether it's sustainable to think they can get out of this 5-point gap to safety, if they're going to have to keep a clean sheet to win a game, I'm not so sure because yeah, there's going to come a time where they are going to have to come from behind in a game, and against some of the sides around them that have been a lot more potent in the final third this season, that might just cost them. So it's a pretty threadbare squad as well at Harris's disposal. I think that's half the reason why Steve Evans seemed to be kind of looking for an exit quite early on this season. So it's going to be really tricky. And last night's result, although it should build some belief that they are going to be able to pick up some positive results in the coming weeks, will definitely be seen as a missed opportunity.
Yeah, and as you say, those wins both by the single goal scoreline just sort of reflects how tight it is down there at the minute. One side who do seem to be enjoying something of a resurgence are Doncaster. I mean, quite incredible, really. For quite some time this season, it looked as though they were almost gone to all intents and purposes. But it's now 2 wins from their last 3 games, and they're to within 4 points of safety. That's quite some turnaround we're suddenly starting to see at the Keepmoat Stadium, isn't it?
Yeah, it will come as a huge relief to supporters, and all credit to Gary McSheffrey. Richie Wellens went in there with quite a big reputation, even despite sort of failing at Salford City last season. He was a manager that was expected to sort of turn their fortunes around after a really disappointing end to the 2020-21 season, sort of falling away from the playoffs and into mid-table. They did some good January business as well. They've got a nice looking central defensive three. Obviously, Donny's back line has really struggled this season. As you can see, the They've conceded the most goals in League One this season. But with Joseph Olowu, Roshan Williams and Ollie Younger now in a back three, that's two 22-year-olds and a 23-year-old. There's definitely plenty of room for positivity, and a clean sheet last night, a 2-0 win over Accrington Stanley that we know aren't shy of an impressive attacking display should definitely build a lot of confidence. It's the consistency. Looking at the clubs above them, it looks like just sustaining this run they've been on, sort of picking up a win every 2 or 3 games, might be enough if the likes of Wimbledon, Fleetwood and Shrewsbury continue the sort of barren runs that we've seen in the last month or so. But yeah, it's been a great turnaround from McSheffrey, and that sort of put me in the direction that even if they don't stay up this season, I'd certainly have Donny amongst the favourites to probably win automatic promotion from League Two, which is probably something that supporters in the darker times this season would like to cling on to, because there has been periods of the season where we probably would have thought that Rovers were favourite to come rock bottom of the league and possibly be mathematically down even before we enter the final sort of 4 or 5 games of the season.
Yeah, really looks as though they've given themselves a chance sort of with this recent form, and it was maybe something that perhaps should have been expected with some impressive business in the transfer window in terms of the players that they brought in, but also obviously this is Gary McSheffrey's sort of his first job in senior management. It was a really tough assignment for him to walk into. So do you feel it's hard not to be impressed to some extent by what he's done?
Oh, definitely, yeah. They were the lowest scorers and conceding the most goals. It really was a recipe for disaster when McSheffrey came in. Obviously, he hasn't been able to shore them up that much defensively, but seeing the wins, the teams that they've been able to get these wins over, winning at MK Dons, winning at Sunderland, that's got to be really encouraging for the supporters. And of course, in his first job, credit to the club for going for him. Obviously, there would have been other candidates that maybe were a bit more experienced at the level and could possibly sort of traditional maybe firefighters to come into that situation and try and get a tune out of the squad. But they've gone with what is possibly a cheaper appointment, but certainly an ambitious one in McSheffrey if they are going to put a lot of belief in him, and they did back him in the January transfer window. So credit to the club for doing that. I do think that the supporters will be finding solace in the recent run, and it does finally feel like Donny is starting to pull themselves back in the right direction after what has been virtually a whole season, if you count the final sort of knock-ins of last campaign of really poor form and disappointing performances on the pitch.
Yeah, I was sort of counting it up last night. It's I think I made it 15 points from 16 league games under McSheffrey, which is not spectacular by any stretch, but it's certainly an improvement on the 13 points from 19 before he took over. So he probably does deserve some credit for that. Looking now into the final team currently occupying one of the relegation places, that's Morecambe. Obviously, it's been a hugely eventful week for the Shrimps with the departure of Stephen Robinson. The manager is left to take over at St Mirren, heading back up to Scotland. So what impacts would you expect sort of that to have on Morecambe between now and the end of the season? And who are you sort of looking at as potential options who could come in and replace him at the Mazoom Arena?
Well, it's a tricky one. The Shrimps did invest considering what they usually do in the summer. They did back Stephen Robinson, and it gave them a bigger budget than they'd ever had in League Two before. I think he did do a good job to have them sort of in touching distance where they are now. It's been a shame because they started the season so well. It has been a really tough patch over, well, sort of since the opening 10 games. They've only won 3 of their last 23 League One outings, which has only see them head one way naturally. Derek Adams is the bookies' favourite. Whether that's just the link because he was there last season, he's just been sacked from Bradford. I'm not so sure. Has he burnt his bridges? Would they accept him back welcomingly, or would there be some opposition to it due to the fact that he declined the chance to manage them at League One this season already? So there's an element of unpredictability due to just waiting on who they're going to bring in. But I have to say, I think that the trends in their performances and their results, and just the drop off and an over reliance on Cole Stockton for goals, has Morecambe, in my eyes, closer to Crewe Alexandra, sadly, than survival. To be honest, I think just looking at their recent performances and just the way I expect them to perform for the rest of the season. If Robinson had stayed, at least I would expect them to finish below Doncaster and Gillingham. So it is a really important appointment. Obviously, Morecambe have never stayed up in the third tier before, and I think Derek Adams would be a good appointment in looking to achieve that. But of course, there's been a lot of changes in the squad since he managed them last season in League Two. So even if he did go in, which would be a good appointment, I don't see it as simple as just picking up where he left off last season. It's a very difficult job for whoever picks it up. And yes, it's going to be interesting because it feels like they're one of those sides that's only been going one way, sadly, since the opening stretch of the season.
Yeah, as you say, plenty of turnover at Morecambe since Derek Adams was last in charge, not least with Jan Songo, so important for them as an influencer in the centre of the park last season. Who went and followed Adams to Bradford of all places, which just shows how things can change in football. But from a Morecambe perspective, you look at results like last night, obviously under caretaker manager and club legend Barry Roach, who was handed a bit of a baptism of fire for his interim spell in charge away at league leaders Rotherham. They fell to a 2-0 defeat, but reading online and looking at the stats, it does seem like there was elements of promise in a solid Morecambe performance. Can you take any cause for optimism for them from that?
I think it shows there's a bit of spirit still there. They were 2-0 down early as well, so that there was no capitulation. That they stayed at it right until the final whistle, and goal difference could play a factor with how close this is going to be. Just looking at the table there, they've got 20 goals on Doncaster and a 9 on Gillingham. That could play a big factor. As we get to the crunch time, the final few fixtures of the season. Defensively, it has been concerning. Morecambe have been probably a sort of lower mid-table side in terms of their attacking process this season. It's just been, they haven't been able to shut the back door, and that's made it a lot more difficult for them to win games. So, it was a decent performance. I mean, Rotherham are by far and away the best side in the league for my money. So, a 2-0 defeat there, considering how early it was as well. The supporters would have been fearing the worst when they went in 2-0 down at the break. So, reasons for optimism from that result. But they'll be looking at sides matches against the sides around them more and hoping to pick up points from those encounters if they are going to stay up.
Yeah, well, that is the 4 teams currently occupying the relegation places. Just to say, anyone, if you are watching along, then please do get in touch in the comments. Let us know who you think is going to be dropping out of League One this season. But now let's take a look at some of the teams who, for the moment at least, are just about keeping their heads above water. And the team who sit just outside the relegation zone are AFC Wimbledon, who we sort of touched on earlier when we were discussing that result with Gillingham last night. That obviously a point, perhaps not a bad one, against the team just below them in the relegation zone. But it does mean that it's now 15 games in all competitions without a win for the Dons. How long can that go on for?
Well, hopefully not much longer. There have been some decent performances to go along with it. They were unfortunate not to get the victory against Sunderland at Plough Lane a couple of weeks ago. And there have been a lot of low margin defeats in that run, which suggests it isn't that sustainable. A lot's gone against Wimbledon in the last sort of year or so. Losing Joe Pigott in the summer was a big loss. Ollie Palmer going to Wrexham in January was not a player that brought the weight of goals of someone like Pigott, but in terms of the physical threat that he poses and just the way he can bring other players into play, I think that was probably a bigger loss than maybe at the time we suggested that it was going to prove to be. They've got the attacking talent, these exciting younger players like Radoni Asal, Luke McCormick. They'll back their ability to get themselves out of this, but it has been a really horrible run, and it's really stunted what was a very promising opening sort of 6 months under Mark Robinson after pulling away from the drop conversation last season. This isn't unfamiliar territory for Wimbledon. They've finished 18th or lower in all of the last 4 seasons in League One. We're used to them putting some kind of escape act together and getting themselves out of it. But they probably haven't been 15 games without a win at this stage of the season in any of those campaigns. So it's going to be really difficult. They host Doncaster at the weekend, which is an absolutely enormous game. If they can win that and start to build some confidence, then I can see them pulling away. But it's about when they're able to stop the rot and get that win. It's a very young squad, which suggests possibly there's a bit of a fragile mentality there. And that winning feeling would go some way to just building some belief again, because at the moment, similarly to the likes of Morecambe, they're only heading one way, sadly.
Yeah, as you say, a lot of tight defeats or draws in sort of that run. There's only really the 4-0 defeat at Bolton at the weekend that you could really consider a proper thrashing that Wimbledon have suffered in this run. So in that case, is it perhaps just a bit of a sense of maybe, keeping the faith? Eventually something's got to give for them?
Yeah, I mean, Doncaster and Gillingham are probably looking up at sides like Wimbledon and Fleetwood and thinking, they're helping us out massively by getting sucked towards the relegation zone when, as you mentioned, over a longer period of time, Donny haven't even been on that good form. It's just because of how poor the sides above them have been that they're able to get themselves in touching distance. Yeah, surely they're not going to end the season 28 games without a win. Wimbledon have got too many good players and have put in performances even in this 15-game winless run that would suggest that there is going to be some light at the end of the tunnel. For me, it's just a matter of when that does happen. If they're not able to beat Doncaster at the weekend, then that would be another blow. Obviously, it's been like it for a few weeks that Morecambe just need to win a game and they're going to get out of it. So maybe mentally that would be very tough as well if Wimbledon do drop into the relegation zone. But yeah, it does all point towards the weekend. I think that's such an enormous game, would have huge implications on both sides' seasons. And Wimbledon have been a little bit stronger at home. So if they can get the ball rolling at the weekend, lean on that home form a little bit more, I think they should be able to steer themselves safely away from the drop, as they always seem to do.
Yeah, next up is Fleetwood Town, again, another side who have changed their manager there at some point this season. They too are on 32 points along with AFC Wimbledon, so just the two clear of the relegation zone. And obviously, as we say, that change in manager, Stephen Craney taking over from Simon Grayson, and it does seem to have sparked something of an improvement in sort of the points return we've seen from the Cod Army. 4 wins and 4 defeats in 14 league games under Craney. Do you think that sort of run is enough for them, or do they need a bit more to sort of really make sure?
I think the games in hand puts them in a slightly stronger position as well. They brought in some good players in January, Enciala and Zach Jules to shore them up at the back. And yeah, Stephen Craney coming in for Simon Grayson has had a really good impact, to be fair. Even though they're 6 games without a win, they have drawn 4 of those in that run, which would suggest that a win can't be far away. And they're picking up points, and with those games in hand, I would boost them up a little bit compared to some of the sides around them. It was probably an inspired decision, or it could reflect to be getting rid of Grayson and promoting Craney, because some of the sides around them have not been able to weather storms under the same managers. So Fleetwood are definitely in a much better position than I think the league table suggests. They'll be confident of surviving, because even though it is 6 games without a win, I think that's Stephen Craney still is representing a figure of hope at Highbury Stadium, and is definitely someone that the squad are buying into his ideas. And I fully expect them, even though the goals have dried up a touch, to get the wins they need in the coming months to make it comfortable before we get right into the final sort of handful of fixtures.
Yeah, you sort of touch on the games in hand. Obviously, Fleetwood have had the last 2 games postponed, courtesy of Eunice coming in the weather front. So you sort of look at those fixtures. It was Lincoln at the weekend. They're another one who we're going to touch on shortly, and then Sheffield Wednesday. So when you sort of consider particularly that one against another side in and around this sort of potentially relegation picture in Lincoln. Do you think this is a help for Fleetwood, or could you argue that there's a bit of a hindrance in terms of the risk of the fixture pile-up that they might get between now and the end of the season?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, it can work both ways. I'm not sure which particular fixtures are going to fall as their games in hand, and it can put a strain on the squad. But given the way the teams are performing around them, sort of picking up the draws that they have in the last few weeks will probably be enough. They probably only need 2 or 3 more wins to get themselves out of this. I think we are looking at a lower points tally than you would usually require in League One to stay in the division. I still think they're pushing in the right direction despite that poor form. It's tricky to predict how games in hand are going to work out. Wigan seem to have dealt quite well with it, although they did experience a small blip, obviously at the other end of the table. But no, I think with the January recruits, they should have the depth of quality in the squad to get themselves out of it and use those extra opportunities to gain on those around them to their advantage.
Yeah, as you say, plenty of experience at this level brought in by Fleetwood over the window, the likes of Zach Jules, Toto Enciala and Ellis Harrison up at the other end of the pitch. One side who may be starting to look a bit nervously over the shoulder next up are Shrewsbury. They're 4 points clear of the relegation zone at the minute, but they are winless in the last 8. So how sort of concerned do you think they need to be at the minute?
Not too concerned. Also, to be honest, I know it's a worrying run, but they've only conceded more than 1 goal in one of their last 13 games, and that was most recently coming in a defeat to Portsmouth. The goals have seriously dried up. They've scored just 4 goals in their last 10 games, which of course is really worrying. We haven't seen the Daniel Udo show as we were accustomed to towards the back end of last year. But I just think they're in a position that the way the Shrewsbury play, that it's a tough place to go to. They're in a position where, with 13 games to go, if they could just grind out possibly 2, 3 1-goal wins, that will be enough. Obviously, I kind of compare them to Gillingham a little bit in the sense that they're very, very reliant on keeping clean sheets to pick up points and to pick up wins. However, that is a more sustainable approach when you've got 7 more points on the tally at this stage of the season. So I think they'll just have enough mettle and experience in that back line to get them the points they require to stay up. But there could definitely be some hairy moments. It might get worse before it gets better. I'm confident in Shrewsbury because they've shown how hard they can be to beat. And in this, it's almost like a mini season at this stage for that sort of bottom 7 in this mini league. I think that defensive solidity in the low margin games that we see so often in League One, I think that could just stand them in good stead and help them pick up enough wins. Like I said, I think 2 or 3 more wins in that last 13 games, along with the draws that they'll probably pick up, could be enough to keep them in the league.
Yeah, of course. And so one thing I do wonder whether it could play to Shrewsbury's advantage is obviously the fact that they were in a not too dissimilar position to this time last season, and they managed to find the results where they needed to keep themselves in League One. Do you think the fact that they've got that experience so recently can help them just get themselves over the line here?
Yeah, definitely. The same goes for AFC Wimbledon as well. Being in this situation should definitely help them create the right atmosphere in the dressing room. They've got quite an experienced side as well. I definitely think that works in their favour. Morecambe, you could argue, it works in their favour as well, where they've been competing against the drop in League Two for so many seasons before last season. Whether that correlates, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, Shrewsbury and Wimbledon definitely have the past on their side, managers that have been in this situation before. And that should definitely fuel belief in the camp. However, if these winless runs do drag on, that belief is only going to shrink. But Shrewsbury are a side that, despite the recent poor run, maybe the same as Fleetwood, I do expect them to get themselves out of it.
Yeah, and just finally, one more team for us to look at sort of a bit more in depth here. That's Lincoln. They're just one point ahead of Shrewsbury, just the 1 win in their last 6, and that was against one of those in this mix in Morecambe. So even so, despite that, I mean, they're 5 points clear. They've got a game in hand on the majority of the sides around them, with the exception of, as we mentioned, Fleetwood. So, would you expect them to be okay in sort of getting over the line and retaining their third tier status?
Yeah, I'm not worried about Lincoln at all, to be honest. I completely trust Michael Appleton. I think this has just been a bit of a blip this season. Any side in League One that lost George Grant, Morgan Rogers, and Brennan Johnson would be worse off. So, yeah, I'm not too worried. I think they did some good January business. The two loans from Swansea, Whittaker and Cullen, are threats at this level, and John Marquis as well is a very, very reliable striker. It's a surprise to see him really applying his trade towards the bottom end of League One. So yeah, I'm not too worried about Lincoln, to be honest. Obviously, they've got a 5 point cushion as it stands, a game in hand on Morecambe. I do think they're heading in the right direction after a real struggle of a season, what it's had been. I don't think anyone had the same expectations for them to go again and achieve what they did last season. They maybe expected a top half finish, but not sort of flirting with automatic promotion. So it has been a disappointing season, but I think they're just coming out the other side of that now. And I think Appleton will definitely be able to put a good run towards that final stretch of the season and build some positivity towards next term. I think Lincoln can push on and probably get to that 50-point mark, which guarantees you, or tends to guarantee you safety in the third tier.
Yeah, you mentioned those players who are always going to be a big miss for them this season. As a Blackburn fan, I'm inclined to throw Taylor Doon into that mix as a loss for them as well. But yeah, so as we sort of say, they were playoff finalists last year. So with that in mind, and considering what you just said, are you slightly surprised to see them quite this far down the table, or was this maybe the sort of position that is perhaps a fair reflection based on sort of that changeover in the squad?
I probably expected them to be around mid-table. I think with the likes of Sheffield Wednesday coming down, Ipswich Town and Wigan Athletic spending the way they did, it was always going to be far more difficult for Lincoln to compete towards the top end. Yeah, it's probably a popular sort of train of thought that this is a much stronger League One than it was last season, and that's seen the Imps struggle. Michael Appleton's even been honest about that before, trying to sort of set expectations differently to what they were at the beginning of the campaign. So it's not a surprise to see them maybe not competing for the playoffs, but to be talking about them in a relegation debate possibly is, and there have been some really concerning runs in the campaign, but I do think they're coming out the other side of it. Produced a great performance at Sunderland probably just over a month ago now, which showed exactly what they were capable of. This was Sunderland under Lee Johnson as well, performing a little bit better than they have been recently. So yeah, I still think Lincoln are a dangerous opposition and a bit of a banana skin for any sides maybe chasing the playoffs or automatic promotion, because they've made some good January signings, and I think Appleton is sort of having to re-evolve given the players that he lost, and it was always going to take some time. So I think that transition is coming to an end now, and yeah, I can definitely see them finishing higher than 17th.
Yeah, perhaps a bit of a consolidation season here for Lincoln to maybe build and go again in the future. And just looking beyond the Imps, there's a 4 point gap then up to your team, Charlton, in 16th, and Cheltenham 2 points ahead of them in 15th. Impressive sort of campaign for them after promotion last season. Can you see any of those sides in that sort of part of the table being dragged into this, or do you think it's simply going to be between these sort of 7-8 clubs we've just been discussing?
Yeah, I can't see any of them getting dragged in, to be honest, just because of the poor runs of those beneath them more than anything else. Charlton have lost 4 on the bounce, but 3 of those against teams in the current top 4 in the league. The other one was against Bolton Wanderers, which is probably one of the form sides, if not the form side in the league as well. So yeah, even though that doesn't bode too well, I think they should be able to get themselves out of it. It's a nice cushion at this stage, even though they are sat in 16th place. Cheltenham I've been very impressed by. Obviously 6 unbeaten, as it just says there. I hadn't realised that was just to the extent of how well they've been playing in the last few months. But yeah, I think it is a battle of sort of the bottom 7 sides. That the teams above them are just looking to have a successful conclusion to the campaign and start building for the next one.
Yeah, so with all that in mind, then let's just finish off by getting your prediction for the 4 sides who you think are going to be relegated from League One this season.
Yeah, this was really tricky. I took quite a while pondering over this. I've got Crewe in 24th. Really sad to see them go. Great club, great identity. I'm sure they'll be back in the next few years. 23rd, I went for Morecambe. Obviously, there's an element of unpredictability given which manager they're going to bring in. If it is Derek Adams, then it's a tough job on his hands, but maybe there's an argument that would increase their chances of surviving. But I think Donny and Gillingham have shown a little bit more hope than the Shrimps in recent weeks. So I've got Morecambe in 23rd. In 22nd, despite saying if they can get a win soon, they'll turn it around, I've actually got AFC Wimbledon. I just think there's a bit of a breakdown in the style of play doesn't seem as sort of bulletproof as it was at the start of the season. I think teams have worked them out to an extent. So yeah, I think the Dons will definitely be. Yeah, that match against Doncaster is enormous. I think maybe I'd be changing my mind if they're able to get a win there. But yeah, if this does drag on, I think that the youthful average age of the squad could possibly work against them. So sadly, I've got Wimbledon finishing in 22nd. Although overall, I do think they're a club who is heading in the right direction. I can't see it being very long in League Two if they are relegated this season. And then 21st place, this was the real dilemma. Do I keep up Doncaster or Gillingham? I ended up just edging towards Donny. I think they're a little bit better going forward. And yeah, despite I only really see a 1-0 scoreline giving Gillingham a win. And the way that Doncaster have been taking points off clubs in the top half of the table in the last few weeks is really encouraging. I've been burnt before getting sort of hot on Doncaster, and defensively they have been so poor at times this season. But I think that relationship with Alowu, Roshan Williams and Ollie Younger at the back, Younger's made a great impact since signing from Sunderland, and it does feel like they are solidifying a little bit. And yeah, obviously Donny were, until this terrible sort of year for them, a side that was knocking on the door of the playoffs in League One. So I think that just puts them above Gillingham. Gillingham have got more experienced players, and I think it'll be really close. I think they can see it going down to the final day, but I've just got Gillingham finishing in 21st place, and I think Donny might just be able to save themselves if, of course, they can continue to be keeping the ball out of the net, which is, yeah, the best defensive form they've shown in recent weeks. So, yeah, Donny just over Gillingham to stay up, Crewe, Morecambe and Wimbledon to join the Gills in League Two next season, sadly.
Yeah, strong cases for all them sides there, Marcus. So really sort of hard to argue for them as a potential four to go down. As you say, sadly, always a shame to see any sides go. But I guess that is part of the drama and why we all follow football quite like we do. So that is it for this debate on the League One relegation battle. My thanks to Marcus for joining me for that. Some really great insight there. Good to get your thoughts on all those sides in the mix at the minute. Thank you to you as well for watching at home. If you are watching on YouTube, please do like and subscribe to our channel. Really helps us get the word out and bring in those subscribers, and we really want to get people following what we've got to say. In the meantime, do keep your eye out on FLW TV. We've got another show coming up at 4 p.m. tonight. That's the Wednesday night preview, looking ahead to tonight's action in the EFL. Sam Rourke will be your host for that one. He's joined by Ben Wignall and Billy Mully. In the meantime, though, thanks again for joining us, and until the next time, we'll see you soon.